She looked at him with disdain and said, "If you can't even pay for a soda, what are you doing trying to win over someone like me?" That night, alone in his penthouse in Lagos, Ayoola, the heir to a billion-dollar empire, made the boldest decision of his life, to disappear. But he wouldn't vanish off the map, he would vanish from luxury, and under a false identity, he would become a simple fisherman in a forgotten village. All to answer a question that not even all the money in the world had been able to solve. Could someone truly love him without knowing who he really was? Now, the game begins, and he's about to discover that true love isn't something you find, it's something that reveals itself. "Is he gone?" the caretaker asked the mansion's security guard as they watched the black car drive out through the wrought iron gates. "Yeah, he's gone. Said he was disappearing for a while and didn't want anyone looking for him," the guard replied, adjusting his cap. "Judging by his face, I don't think he'll be back anytime soon." On that humid Tuesday morning, Ayoola left behind everything most people would consider a perfect life. His three-story penthouse in Ikoyi, the 3 luxury cars parked in the garage, the imported suits lined up in a closet bigger than many apartments, and a business empire built by his grandfather. His destination, a coastal village forgotten by time, called Ilara on the shores of Ondo State. The decision hadn't been sudden. Behind the tall walls and flawless exterior, Ayoola had carried a deep sense of emptiness for years. At social events, he couldn't help but attract stares and smiles, especially from women. But over time, he realized people were more interested in what he had than in who he was. Flowers, dinners, expensive gifts. None of it seemed enough to cover up the emptiness of relationships built on falsehood. On his last night in Lagos, sitting on the terrace of his mansion with a glass of wine in hand and silence as his only company, Ayoola reached an inevitable conclusion. He needed to disappear, not from the world, but from the environment he lived in. He had to strip away the titles, the last name, and the fortune. He wanted to be just one among many, an ordinary man. Only then, maybe, he would find someone who loved him for real. The next day, already in Ilara, Ayoola stepped off the local bus wearing a wrinkled linen shirt, faded jeans, and rubber sandals. No one there knew who he was, and that was perfect. He carried only a worn backpack and a fake name, Kunle. "Looking for someone?" asked a sun-weathered fisherman as he adjusted a net on the sand. "I'm looking for a place to stay, a room, something simple. I'm going to try life as a fisherman here," Ayoola replied with a reserved smile. The man looked him up and down. Despite the plain clothes, there was something about Ayoola that didn't quite fit, but he didn't question it. "You can talk to Miss Moreniki over by the roadside. She rents out a room in the back. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and cheap." Not long after, Ayoola settled into a small room with a single bed, a noisy fan, and a window overlooking the ocean. The wall was peeling, the sheet threadbare, but he felt free for the first time in many years. That night he heard the sounds of the village, crickets, distant laughter, children's voices playing in the sand. He fell asleep with a slight smile on his face. The next morning he went to the pier, where men were starting to push boats out to sea. Ayoola approached a group preparing for the day's fishing trip. "I need to learn," he said humbly. "I'm here to work." The oldest among them, named Baba Taju, eyed him with suspicion. "You've got hands that have never touched a net." "I learn fast. I just want a chance." "All right, let's see if you can handle the sway of the sea, Kunle." And so began Ayoola's new routine. He woke with the sun, helped carry nets, cleaned fish, learned to row, and even stitched torn boats. His once soft hands were now calloused. His body, used to air conditioning, got used to the blazing sun and the smell of fish. And despite the aches and fatigue, he felt strangely fulfilled. At night, Ayoola observed the village closely. People knew each other by name. laughed loudly in the square, shared meals. It was a world completely different from Lagos. And curiously, no one seemed to care about his past. He was just Kunle, the new helper among the fishermen. One afternoon, as he returned from the sea, he overheard two women talking in the market. "They say that new guy isn't from around here. Came from some big place. Probably running from some debt or a woman." Ayula laughed to himself. Little did they know he was running from too much money and too many gold-digging women. As the weeks passed, he earned respect among the locals. He didn't talk much about himself, but he wasn't arrogant either. He helped where he could, whether pushing boats or buying something from the village store. He learned to say "good morning" in the local dialect and to eat with his hands without fuss. Despite the simplicity of everything, Ayula still held on to the hope that had brought him there. To find someone who would see him for the man he was, not the wealth he was hiding. Every interaction, every new face in the village was a possibility. But he wasn't in a rush. He knew that to be truly loved, he'd have to truly live. And now, for the first time, he felt he was on the right path. "Can you help me with this bag, please?" asked a young woman in a floral dress, her eyes lightly lined with makeup, balancing two bags filled with cassava and fresh fish in the middle of the bustling market. Ayula, still sweaty from the morning's fishing trip, was holding a bowl of eBay and dried fish stew he had just bought from one of the stalls. At the sound of the soft voice, he turned immediately. "Of course," he replied, reaching out and taking one of the bags from her. "Thanks." "My name is Ifeoma," she said, smiling with her thin lips and alert eyes. "I'm Kunle," he answered, using the fake name he had adopted since arriving in the village. "You're the new fisherman, right? People have been talking. I guess I am. I'm trying to learn." They walked together down a narrow village street where the sounds of children playing echoed through the alleys and the smell of grilled fish mingled with damp firewood. Ifeoma seemed curious, full of questions. "Where are you from? Do you have family here?" "I came from far away, wanted a new life, a fresh start." "I get it. Sometimes starting over really is a good thing. Life here is very simple, but it has its own worth." She didn't ask anything more about his past. Instead, she spoke about her mother, who sold tapioca on Sunday mornings, and about her dream of opening a small cosmetic shop. Ayula, his face partially hidden under an old cap, kept a low profile but noticed everything. The way Ifeoma walked, how she told stories, the way she tossed her hair back. There was something about her that reminded him of a few women he had known in Lagos, beautiful, confident, always with some kind of plan. That same day, Ifeoma invited him to share a bottle of Maltina in front of her uncle's stall, a quiet man with suspicious eyes. Sitting on plastic chairs, they talked until the sky darkened. "You're different, Kunle," she said. "You don't seem like you're chasing anything. That's rare in men these days." Ayula smiled, unsure if that was a compliment or a trap. In the days that followed, Ifeoma showed up at the market more often when Ayula was there, always smiling, always with some excuse to start a conversation. One morning, she was waiting for him outside the pier. "Hi, do you think you could help me with something?" "What is it?" "I need to send some money to my aunt in Akur. She's sick and needs medicine. I'm a little short this month. I thought maybe you could lend me some." The request, spoken so casually, put Ayula on alert. He took a breath and replied, "Of course. How much do you need?" She hesitated, as if trying to seem modest. 3,000 naira would help a lot." Ayula pulled the amount from the small cloth wallet he carried and handed it to her. Ifeoma thanked him with a kiss on the cheek and promised to pay it back soon. But the days went by, and she never mentioned the money again. Instead, she came back with another request. "Sorry to bother you again, Kunle, But my younger brother got suspended from school because we couldn't pay the tuition. Could you help me just this once? I promise I'll pay you back everything." This time, the amount was higher, 8,000 naira. Ayula knew exactly what was going on. It was an old pattern, well known in the social circles of Lagos. Affection shaped by convenience, affection tied to financial generosity. Even so, he decided to give her the money. He wanted to be sure. He needed to be sure. In the weeks that followed, Ifeoma sought him out more frequently, always with new reasons: a broken cooking pot, a blouse for her mother to wear to a funeral, a gas refill. Each excuse came wrapped in charm, sometimes even affection. But there was no depth. She never asked how Ayula was, never cared about what he felt or thought, and never came without a practical reason. One afternoon, lying in his hammock strung between two palm trees, Ayula reflected on the past few days. The sound of the sea was constant, almost comforting, but his mind was restless. The plan had seemed simple at first: live like an ordinary man and see who would come close for who he truly was. But even dressed as a fisherman, living in a modest room and showing no sign of wealth, there were still those who tried to take advantage. Ifeoma didn't love him. Maybe she didn't even truly like him. She saw him only as a potential provider, modest or not, hidden or not. The next morning, when he saw Ifeoma at the market, Ayula decided to pull away. He told her he wouldn't have any more money available as fish sales had dropped. Her smile faded almost instantly. In seconds, the sweetness turned into indifference. "Oh, I see. All right then. Have a good day," she said, turning and walking in the opposite direction without looking back. At that moment, Ayula got the confirmation he already suspected. She had never cared about who he was, only about what she could get from him. The peace the village offered wasn't enough to hide certain truths about the human heart. Distrust began to grow in him again. Would he ever find someone genuine? Was everyone always, in some way, after what he could offer? The frustration stayed with him for the rest of the day as he pushed the boat into the water alongside Baba Taju. The sea was rough, the sky was overcast, and Ayula's heart felt the same. But as he looked toward the horizon, he decided it wasn't time to give up. His journey was just beginning, and even though he had stumbled early on, he wouldn't let that disappointment destroy the hope that had brought him there. "Hey, are you free right now?" asked a soft voice behind him, just as Ayula was tying the nets to one of the wooden posts on the pier. He turned around, the sun still in his eyes, wiping sweat from his forehead with his shirt sleeve. A young woman with warm brown skin and a calm gaze was looking at him. She wore a light headscarf, a faded blue dress, and simple sandals. In her hand, she carried a cloth bag filled with fruit. "I am," Ayula replied, surprised by the unexpected approach. "I need to get home. It's past the soccer field, near the cassava plantation. Do you think you could give me a ride in your wheelbarrow? I'm tired today." Ayula smiled and grabbed the wheelbarrow without hesitation. "Of course." "Miss Zainab," she answered with a slight smile, placing the bag in front and settling into the makeshift seat. The sound of the wheels rolling through sand and then over packed earth was almost musical. Zainab didn't speak much, but her silence was comfortable. There was something in her eyes, something calm, yet deep. When she spoke, it was with simple words but full of meaning. "You're the new fisherman, right?" she asked, starting a conversation without looking directly at him. "Yes, my name's Kunle. It's nice to see new faces around here. The village is always the same. I like when something different shows up." "And what do you do?" Ayula asked, curious. "I sell fruit at the market, help out at home, take care of my siblings. Life here isn't easy, but we manage." Ayula listened intently. Unlike Epheoma, who talked a lot and always centered conversations around her own desires, Zainab seemed grounded, present. There was no pretense in her voice, no effort to impress. When they arrived at her simple home, made of mud with a rusted tin roof, Zainab hopped off the wheelbarrow and grabbed her bag. "Thank you, Kunle. May Allah reward you." "No need to thank me," he replied, already regretting not having started more conversation. "Maybe one day you'll stop by and try some kunu. My mum makes a really good one." She smiled and went inside. In the following days, Ayula couldn't stop thinking about her. Her simplicity, the honest way she looked into his eyes, her serenity. She was different. It stirred something in him. 2 days later, while carrying a basket of fish from the boat to the market, he spotted Zainab selling oranges under the shade of an improvised canopy made of colorful cloth. He walked over slowly. "Still have any kunu?" he asked, smiling. Zainab recognized him immediately and laughed. "Only if you help me sell 2 bowls of this fruit." "Deal." He sat beside her and stayed there, calling out to customers, joking with kids passing by, laughing along with the other vendors. For the first time since he'd arrived in the village, Ayula felt like part of something. By late morning, with nearly everything sold, Zainab offered him a calabash of chilled kunu. They drank together, sitting on the ground, leaning against the wall. "You seem happy here, Kunle. Don't you miss the city?" "I ran away from it. I needed peace. I needed to find out who I was without all that." "All that?" She raised an eyebrow. "Too many lights, too much noise, too many people who only cared about what I could give, not about who I was." Zainab nodded slowly. "Life here is raw. But when it's real, you can feel it right away." And that's when Ayula realized she saw him for who he was, without expensive clothes, without knowing anything about his past. She was looking at him, the fisherman, sweaty and salty, with calloused hands and a tired body, and still, there was warmth in her eyes. That night, Ayula returned to Miss Mareniki's room with a light heart. For the first time since he came up with his crazy plan to pretend to be an ordinary man, it felt like maybe it was working. Zainab hadn't asked him for anything. She hadn't hinted at any interest beyond the honest connection they shared. She was genuine, and that kind of sincerity for a man who'd spent his life surrounded by elegant lies was a rare gift. Over the next week, he looked for Zainab at the market more often. Sometimes he just watched her from a distance, smiling at customers, negotiating with a firm voice and endless patience. Other times, he made a point to buy some fruit just to strike up a conversation. "You work hard," he commented once. "And you fish hard," she replied. "Life doesn't wait." One afternoon, after walking her home again, Zainab paused before going inside. "I know there's something different about you, Kunle. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. I just hope it's something good." Ayula swallowed hard. She had no idea, but for some reason he felt he could trust her. Maybe someday. Zainab wasn't like Epheoma. She wasn't interested in benefits or favors. Her life was hard, yes, but she didn't use it as currency. She was light, strong, and quietly steady. And that touched Ayula in a way he couldn't explain. That night, lying in his narrow bed with the distant sound of waves and the hum of crickets in the air, Ayula realized something was changing inside him. For the first time in a long while, he felt hope. A hope that didn't come from what he could buy, but from what he could feel. And at the center of it all was Zainab's calm smile. "Kunle!" called Zainab, hurrying across the beach sand with bare feet and her skirt lifted to her calves. Ayula dropped the net he was mending and stood up with a surprised smile. She rarely showed up at the pier at that time of day. "What a nice surprise," he said, wiping his hands on the cloth tied around his waist. "I had to leave the market early today. Thought I'd stop by here before heading home, she replied, slightly out of breath, her eyes shining. I brought roasted plantains and ikuru. It's still warm. Ayula sat beside her on a wooden log, watching the boats in the distance and taking in the smoky aroma mixed with sea air. The food was simple and delicious, but the gesture meant even more. Do you always think about others? He asked, as he chewed slowly. Zainab shrugged with a smile. Sometimes. I like taking care of people, but I also like knowing how you're doing. Me? Yes, Kunle. You never talk about your life before the village. Never said if you have family, siblings, friends. You just say you came from far away. Ayula hesitated, his heart beginning to race. The trust between them had grown with each meeting, but the lie still stood between them and the truth. Even so, he decided it wasn't time to tell her everything just yet. But he could test the waters. The truth is, life hasn't been easy, he began, faking a tired sigh. Being a fisherman here doesn't pay much. Some days I go home with nothing, just the smell of the sea on my clothes. Zainab looked at him for a moment. Her eyes, calm like twin ponds, showed no judgment, only empathy. Money is important, yes, she said, but it's not everything. Some things matter more. Peace of mind, honesty, a clean heart. You have those. Her words hit him deeply. It was exactly what he needed to hear, and what so many others had never managed to say, not with expensive gifts or rehearsed declarations. Zainab leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. You know, I sometimes think God doesn't give everyone luxury because he knows how much it can change a person. But when he puts two right souls in each other's path, that's worth more than any fancy car or big house. Ayula closed his eyes for a moment, struggling with the urge to let everything out and confess right there. But the time still didn't feel quite right. In the days that followed, their meetings became more frequent. She would wait for him after the market with a small bottle of cold water. He would stop by to help her push the cart back home. They talked under the moonlight, sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing over simple stories. Ayula knew he was falling in love. The feeling grew slowly, like waves washing up on the shore, and Zainab seemed increasingly comfortable by his side. There were no demands, no expectations, just presence. Until one warm Saturday afternoon, he made a decision. He couldn't keep hiding who he was, not from someone like Zainab. That day, he invited her to walk to the coconut grove. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and violet. They sat on a fallen log. A gentle breeze blew. Zainab, there's something I need to tell you. She turned to him serious. There was no fear, only attention. My name isn't Kunle. It's Ayula. And I'm not a fisherman. Not really. She frowned, confused. What do you mean? He took a deep breath. I'm from Lagos. I'm a businessman. My father owns a chain of companies. I came here because I needed to get away from everything. I wanted to know if someone could care about me for who I am, not what I have. Zainab remained silent. The breeze stirred her headscarf. Her eyes searched his, as if looking for cracks in the truth. So, this was all a plan? A test? No, he answered quickly. It was a leap of faith. I never expected to meet you here. But once I did, everything changed. What we have is real. I was afraid of losing it if I told you. Zainab looked down for a moment. Then she lifted her face and spoke calmly. I fell in love with who you were here. The man who helped me at the market, who laughed with me in the evenings, who never thought he was better than anyone. If you're still that man, nothing changes. Ayula's chest tightened. Gratitude welled up in his eyes, and he held her hand firmly. I am that man, and I want to be him for you. No masks, no lies. Zainab nodded, squeezing his hand in return. Then may Allah guide us, because love, when it's real, survives even the truth. That night, Ayula didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling of the simple room, his heart full. For the first time, it wasn't fear that occupied his thoughts, but certainty. He had found what he had been searching for all along, true love. And now he could finally live it in peace. "Is that really your gate?" Zainab asked in a low voice, her eyes wide as she stood before the massive wrought-iron gates adorned with the family's golden crest. Ayula gave a sheepish smile and nodded. "It is, and not just the gate. All of this is my family's house." Zainab adjusted the scarf on her head, her fingers trembling slightly. The rented black car sat parked before the grand mansion in Ikoyi, one of Lagos's most prestigious neighborhoods. In front of them stretched vast gardens, an ornate fountain, and the three-story manor with white columns, tinted glass windows, and balconies overlooking the city. She had never set foot in a place like this, never even imagined a world so full of shine and silence at the same time. Everything around her felt distant, elegant, and far too restrained. "Nervous?" Ayula asked, noticing her silence. "A little," she admitted. "What about you?" He hesitated for a second. "A lot." The security guard opened the gates with a stiff, respectful nod. The car entered and stopped before a white marble staircase. Ayula took a deep breath, stepped out, and offered his hand to Zainab, who took it firmly. Inside the main hall, the silence was almost oppressive. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling. The walls were lined with family portraits, business trophies, and framed photographs. A maid guided them to the sitting room. Seated in elegant armchairs were Mr. Babajid and Mrs. Ajoke, Ayula's parents. Both looked impeccable, dressed in refined clothes and sitting with perfect posture. The mother smiled when her son entered, but the smile vanished as soon as her eyes landed on Zainab. "Good afternoon, Mom, Dad." "This is Zainab," Ayula said firmly, his fingers laced with hers. "The woman I love." A second of silence stretched into what felt like a full minute. Mrs. Ajoke cleared her throat and slowly stood up. "Welcome," she said with a polite but icy smile. "Please have a seat." Zainab nodded and sat down quietly, her gaze lowered. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her. Mr. Babajid adjusted his glasses, crossed his legs, and spoke in a reserved tone. "Ayula, would you like to tell us how you met?" "We met in Ilara, the fishing village. I was there, trying to live a simple life. Zainab met me as a fisherman. She didn't know who I was. She never asked for anything. And yet she gave me everything: understanding, respect, honesty." Mrs. Ajoke glanced subtly at her husband, then spoke in a sweet voice with a sharp undertone. "Ayula, you know we've always wanted you to find someone special. But Zainab, dear, you're not from our world, and I don't mean that unkindly, it's just reality." Zainab didn't respond. She felt small in that room, but she kept her chin up. "Do you understand the kind of life my son leads?" Ajoke continued. "Events, business meetings, international travel, company responsibilities, investments, expectations. It's a structured life, a life under pressure. And tradition," Mr. Babajide added. "Our name is our legacy, and the woman beside Ayula must represent that. She must come from a family with similar values, education, pedigree." Ayula clenched his fists. "So that's it? You see nothing beyond appearance and background?" "We see the future," his father replied firmly. "And we're thinking about what's best for you." "But you don't know anything about Zainab," Ayula fired back. "You don't know her heart, her strength, what she sacrificed for her family, her honesty. She loved me when she thought I didn't have a cent to my name." Mrs. Ajoke maintained her posture, but her gaze wavered. "Love is not enough, my son. Marriage is more than love. It's alliance, strategy, protection of legacy. Zainab then stood up. Her voice was calm but firm. I didn't come here to argue with anyone, and I'm not the kind of woman to beg for a place in someone else's home. I love Ayula for who he is, not for what he has, but I won't be anyone's burden or shame. If my love isn't enough, I can leave right now. Ayula gripped her hand tightly. You're not going anywhere. Silence fell again. The tension hung heavy, like fog. Finally, Mr. Babajide stood up, turned his back and said, Do as you wish, but don't expect my support. Zainab swallowed hard, and Ayula felt the world collapse around him. Still, he stood firm. Then we'll go it alone, he said. But I'm not giving her up. Never. They left the house without looking back. The evening sky was overcast, reflecting the weight on their shoulders. In the car, Zainab remained silent until she finally murmured, If you want to change your mind, I'd understand. I don't want to be the cause of a split in your family. You're not the cause of anything, Ayula said, squeezing her hand. They're the ones who got it wrong, and me, I've made my choice. Zainab gave a faint smile, though her eyes still shimmered with held-back tears. In the days that followed, Ayula tried to reason with his parents. He tried to persuade them, to explain who the woman he had chosen truly was. But it was all in vain. Mr. Babajide wouldn't budge. And the more Ayula insisted, the further apart he and his family grew, until one morning he received a short and final call from his father. Since you've chosen to abandon what we built, you'll live with your own decisions. As of today, you no longer have access to the accounts, the company, or the house. Good luck, Ayula. He hung up without waiting for a reply. Ayula stared at the phone for a long time. The break was official. He was truly on his own. And yet, he felt no regret. Because with Zainab, even without marble walls or the comfort of bulletproof cars, he had something he never had in all that luxury: peace. That same day, he packed his few belongings and went to live with her in the village. The house was simple, made of mud, with a tin roof and a small backyard with chickens, but there was love in every corner. Zainab prepared meals with care, and he left early each morning to take odd jobs at the pier, sometimes helping to push boats, other times repairing nets for a few naira. Life was hard, but it was real, and for now that was enough. You don't have to do this, Ayula, said Zainab, sitting on the edge of the wooden bed, her gaze tired, shoulders slumped, trembling hands resting on her lap. Ayula stood silently in the small doorway of the kitchen, his eyes fixed on the cracked cement floor. The pot on the stove had already started to hiss, but neither of them seemed to notice. I do, he replied, his voice low, choked by the weight of the choice. Life with Zainab had been hard, but honest. After his father cut all ties, Ayula had tried to adapt. He found a job at a small shipyard in the village, fixing boat engines and hauling parts. The pay barely covered their basic needs, but he smiled. He came home covered in grease, exhausted, yet certain he was close to the one he loved. Zainab, on the other hand, tried to hide her fatigue. Having come from a life of scarcity, she was no stranger to hardship. But watching Ayula, who had once been a prince surrounded by luxury, live like a man with no future, hurt her more than her own struggles. She loved him too much to see him fade. When I chose to be with you, it wasn't out of pity, Ayula continued, and poverty doesn't scare me. What scares me is the thought of going back to a place where everything is a lie. But it's not just about you, Zainab whispered. It's about us and what's coming. Ayula looked at her closely. Zainab avoided his gaze. What's coming? She hesitated, then shook her head. It's nothing. Zainab. He moved closer and sat beside her. She held his hand tightly. I love you, but you can't keep living like this. working all day for crumbs, sleeping on a crooked mattress, eating nothing but beans and water. You used to own an empire. Now you fix rusty boats. I can't keep watching this. I feel guilty. You lost everything because of me." Ayula stood up, frustrated. "It wasn't because of you. It was my choice, and I'd make it again." "But I wouldn't let you," she said firmly. That conversation repeated for many nights. Zainab insisted, begged, pleaded with him to return to Lagos, to talk to his father, to reclaim his life, his company, his name. She said she loved him, but didn't want to be the reason for his downfall. "You don't have to stay with me if it feels like a burden," she said through tears. "You deserve more." And so, in a quiet dawn, after hours lying awake, Ayula made his decision. The next morning he packed discreetly, folded his simple clothes, slipped on the same worn sandals he had arrived in, and left without making a sound. As he walked out the door, he looked at Zainab, still asleep, peaceful, and gently touched her face, whispering, "I'm coming back for you, for us." The mansion's foyer was exactly the same, cold, elegant, unchanged. The sound of the housekeeper's heels echoed down the polished halls. Mr. Babajide was in his office, eyes buried in reports, as always. When Ayula entered, he raised an eyebrow, but didn't look surprised. "So you decided to come back," he said with a trace of irony. "I'm here, Father, but not empty-handed. I have a proposal." His father gave a humorless smile. "Proposals are for partners, not for rebellious sons. I'll return to the company, take back my position, do whatever's needed to keep the business running, but I ask for one thing in return." "And what would that be?" Ayula hesitated. He knew what was coming. "Freedom to live my life with whoever I choose." Silence filled the room for a few long seconds. "That's not possible," Babajide replied. "Things have changed. Since you left, we've made new partnerships. We're about to merge businesses with the Adebayo family. And there's a condition, marriage to their daughter, Tomisin." Ayula felt his stomach turn. "Tomisin? She's a refined young woman, well-educated, knows how to carry herself. And more importantly, the merger depends on this. Refusing it would be a financial disaster. A scandal." Ayula knew Tomisin, arrogant, spoiled, full of vanity, everything Zainab wasn't. "So that's it? Either I agree to this marriage or I'm out." "This is more than marriage, Ayula. It's an alliance. It's what will secure this family's future." Hours later, Ayula returned to the village. Zainab waited for him at the gate. Her eyes, when they met his, were a mix of relief and fear. "You came back?" He nodded, but there was no joy in his face. "I need to tell you something." They went inside and sat side by side on the bed. "They accepted me back, but with one condition." Zainab said nothing. She just waited. "I have to marry Tomisin. It's a business deal." Silence fell like a stone. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice breaking. "That's what I was afraid of." "I don't want to," Ayula said painfully. "But you insisted, said I deserved to go back, that I couldn't live the way I was. I'm doing this for you." Zainab turned her face away, fighting back tears. "Not for me, not like this." The following days were a whirlwind. The wedding was scheduled, clothes ordered, invitations sent. Newspapers celebrated the union as the merging of two empires. But Ayula went through it all like a ghost. Zainab watched from afar, in silence. Inside, she was torn apart, until one night, alone at home, nauseous and lightheaded, she decided to go to the village health center. After a quick test, the nurse confirmed, "You're pregnant, Zainab, 4 months along." She was stunned. How? Her periods had continued lightly and the symptoms had been subtle. But now everything made sense. The nausea, the dizziness, the sensitivity. Zainab returned home in shock, She sat on the bed and cried silently. They were Ayula's children. His. Fate had played its cruelest trick. She thought about telling him, but she remembered the pain in his eyes when he spoke about the forced marriage. She couldn't add more weight to his burden. He was trying to protect what little was left. Telling him now would only tear him further. "I'll protect our children," she said to herself, "even if I have to do it alone." And so, she chose to keep the secret. She knew the road ahead would be hard, but she didn't want Ayula to carry another ounce of guilt. He had done what she asked. Now, it was her turn to pay the price. "Blessed be," exclaimed Donna Fadek, the oldest woman on the street, as she saw Zainab step out of her house with difficulty, leaning on a cloth bag tied like a makeshift support. Zainab smiled weakly. The weight in her belly could no longer be hidden. The loose clothes she wore did little to conceal the rounded curve, and her labored breathing revealed the exhaustion accumulated over the past months. She carried the secret the same way she carried the children, with strength on the outside, but a heart in pieces inside. "Heading to the market?" the neighbor asked. "Just going to the health center to check on the babies." "May Allah bless all three of you," said the woman, unaware that she was also referring to the absent father. Zainab walked alone down the sandy road. The sun blazed high in the sky, beating down on her scarf-covered shoulders. Her body was swollen, her feet ached, and hunger had become a constant companion. But her pride still kept her from accepting help, even from the kindest neighbors. At the clinic, the nurse who had been with her since the first month greeted her with warmth. "The babies are growing well. 1 boy and 1 girl, you hear? 2 blessings." Zainab nodded, eyes brimming with tears. "And the father, will he be coming today?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, he's far away." The nurse asked no more questions. She could already read the pain between the lines. Elsewhere in the city, inside a mansion with mirrored windows and perfectly trimmed gardens, Ayula stood in a light grey suit, looking at himself in the mirror. Around him, floral arrangements, seamstresses, bridesmaids, everything ready for the big day. His wedding to Thomasin was in 1 week, and he felt absolutely nothing. Thomasin, meanwhile, paraded through the halls in extravagant dresses and flashy accessories, barking orders at the staff and posing for selfies, her acrylic nails extended like claws. Ayula could barely pretend to care. His heart was elsewhere, in another village, in another time. "Don't forget the ceremony is in the glass hall, not that boring auditorium," she complained, looking at her phone. "I want the world to see our love." What love? Ayula thought. Meanwhile, at the main house, Mrs. Ajoke adjusted her scarf in front of the mirror, getting ready to head out. She had a special appointment. In recent days, she had been leaving the house often, always alone. Said she was visiting sick friends but never took a driver, and she always came back lighter, with a glow in her eyes. In truth, Mrs. Ajoke had run into Zainab by chance weeks earlier at the Abeokuta market while visiting a fabric supplier. She had almost not recognized the young woman. Thinner, her face tired, her feet swollen, her dress worn. But the eyes, those eyes, she would never forget. "Zainab?" she asked in disbelief, approaching the vegetable stall. Zainab turned slowly, and for a moment the two worlds collided again. "Mrs. Ajoke," she replied, surprised. The matriarch's gaze dropped immediately to Zainab's round belly. She said nothing. Then, in an unexpected gesture, she took her hand. "They're Ayula's, aren't they?" Zainab hesitated, but there was no hiding it anymore. The children kicked in her womb as if demanding recognition. "Yes, they're his." Mrs. Ajoke felt her chest tighten. She took a deep breath and, without another word, led Zainab to the car. "You can't keep living like this." Zainab tried to refuse, tried to cling to the little independence she had left. But Ajoke was firm. "You're carrying my grandchildren. That makes you part of my family, whether you like it or not." Once strict and critical, she now moved about, smiling, lighter, almost gentle. She went places alone, returned quietly, but always with a spark in her eyes. One afternoon he confronted her. "Mom, why have you been so happy lately?" She laughed, sitting with him on the porch. "Not everything needs to be said at the right time, my son, but soon you'll understand." "Does this have to do with Zainab?" She paused, then gently touched his shoulder. "Just come with me tomorrow. I want to show you something." The next day, the two of them got in the car and began the drive. Ayula had no idea where they were going. They arrived at the gate of the country house. A guard recognized them and quickly opened it. Ayula stepped out of the car, curious. When he entered, he saw a woman sitting on the couch. Her hair was covered, her belly enormous, and she held two small bundles in her arms. It was Zainab. She looked up, and Ayula froze. "Zainab?" She said nothing, just smiled and, with tears in her eyes, extended her arms for him to come closer. "They're yours, Ayula." He fell to his knees, his face in his hands, heart racing. Emotion overtook him. There they were, his children, two tiny miracles, a boy and a girl, his family. I didn't know," he murmured, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to burden you," Zainab whispered. "I thought it was best to let you move on in peace." Ayula stood up, took the babies in his arms, and held them tightly to his chest, crying like never before. Mrs. Ajoke quietly stepped away, letting the reunion happen the way it was meant to, in silence, with love. That moment changed everything. Ayula knew it. And there was no more room for business deals, strategic alliances, or staged weddings. Now, he had something real to fight for. "Dad, why are we coming here?" Mr. Babajid asked, suspicious, as he stepped out of the car with firm strides, clearly uncomfortable with the lack of information. Ayula simply smiled faintly and pointed to the White House ahead, with its neatly trimmed garden and freshly painted wooden gate. "You'll understand once you walk inside." As they crossed the threshold, Mr. Babajid came to an abrupt stop. There, in a simple armchair, sat Zainab, and in her arms, two small bundles shifted gently. Two babies slept, one wrapped in a blue blanket, the other in pale pink. The silence in the room grew heavy. The disbelief on the father's face was clear in every feature. "What is this?" he asked, staring at Ayula. "Your grandchildren, Dad," Ayula replied with a calm but steady voice. "This is Idris, and this is Adesewa, my children, your grandchildren." The old businessman raised a hand to his mouth, eyes misty for the first time in years. He walked slowly toward Zainab, knelt in front of her, and looked at the peaceful faces of the babies. The tears came without warning. I didn't know," he whispered. "Forgive me, Zainab. Forgive me for everything." She nodded in silence, her own eyes filled with tears. Ayula stood by her side, now grounded, unwavering. There was a sense of reconciliation in the air, as if finally all masks had fallen away. Later, back at the family mansion, Ayula asked to speak with Thomasin in private. She was in the master bedroom, packing yet another suitcase filled with expensive clothes and jewelry. "Thomasin," he began, "we need to talk." She rolled her eyes. "Again?" "For the last time," he said. "I'm calling off the wedding." She turned sharply. "What? You're joking." "I'm not. You and I both know this marriage has no love, no truth, only business. And I already have a family. I have children. Twins." Thomasin's expression shifted from shock to pure fury. "You've been lying to me this whole time? This is humiliating." No, Thomasin, the humiliation is living a lie just to keep up appearances. Thomasin didn't respond. Her eyes burned with rage as she grabbed her phone and called her father immediately. "Dad, you won't believe this. He humiliated me. He's with another woman and has children with her." That same day, Mr. Adebayo, Thomasin's father and a long-time business partner of the Babajide family, stormed into the mansion like a hurricane. His suit was wrinkled, his face flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable," he shouted as he found Mr. Babajide in the hall. "Your son broke the agreement. He humiliated my daughter, destroyed years of alliance between our families. Adebayo, please calm down." "No, I warned you. If he broke off the engagement, I'd pull out of the deal. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm withdrawing all my investments. We're done." Mr. Babajide turned pale. This meant millions in losses, a devastating blow. But something inside him, something that had been dormant for years, finally woke up. He had clung to his pride, tried to control his son's destiny, sacrificed true love for the sake of image. "If that's how it must be," he replied calmly, "then so be it. I'd rather lose contracts than lose my family." Adebayo stormed out, dragging Thomasin behind him. The mansion was quiet for hours afterward until Mr. Babajide called Ayula into the office. "Son," he said, eyes downcast, "I'm sorry for everything." Ayula simply nodded, swallowing hard. "I spent too much time trying to shape you into the perfect heir, but now I've seen what truly matters. I saw my grandchildren. I saw you as a father, as a man, and I'm proud." They embraced for the first time in years. Meanwhile, Evelyn, who had been keeping tabs on everything happening in the Babajide household, finally learned about the twins. Enraged, she went to the mansion's gate and demanded to be let in. "I want to speak to the family, to Ayula, to his mother." The guards didn't allow her in. She yelled, cried, cursed, and when she realized she no longer had any power over the situation, she called her father in desperation. But this time, Evelyn's father didn't act. He already knew it was over, that there was no room left for forced alliances. The tide had turned. With Evelyn out of the picture and the Adebayo partnership officially dissolved, peace finally returned to the Babajide family. Mrs. Ajoke reorganized the house to welcome her grandchildren. One room was turned into a nursery. A section of the garden was transformed into a play area where the children could grow freely. Zainab was officially embraced as part of the family. With her quiet strength and dignity, she won over even the house staff, who saw her as a symbol of grace and resilience. Ayula returned to the company, but under new terms: fewer trips, more time at home, shorter meetings, and lunch with his children every day. A new chapter had begun. And on that Sunday, when the whole family gathered in the garden for a small welcome celebration for the babies, complete with traditional food, soft music, and light laughter, Ayula looked around with a full heart. Zainab walked among the plants with Adesewa in her arms, while Idris slept peacefully on his grandmother's chest. He approached his wife, wrapped an arm around her waist, and whispered, "We made it." Zainab smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "With faith, patience, and truth, we made it." And in that moment, amid smiles and slow footsteps, the millionaire who had once pretended to be a fisherman realized he had caught something far more valuable than true love: peace.